guest today is Mary Eisenhauer. Mary is just a few years younger than I am, but our worlds seem very much in sync as she recently wrote and published a book called Reimagining Midlife, which contains stories of 35 women and their journeys to figuring out their next chapters. Does this sound familiar? Well, it's basically what we do here on this podcast on AGELESS. Mary is a full time human resources professional, the married mother of daughters, just like me, and someone who is committed to showing women they have so much to offer at any age. Mary, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So, I was so excited to hear about your project because it aligns so closely, obviously, with what I'm doing. And I think there are so many women like us in midlife who are trying to figure out next chapters. So you're a perfect fit for the show, but I want to start with your background, your origin story, and talk a little bit about where you grew up, how your life started, and how you kind of got on your career path.
Sure. So I am a lifelong New Englander. So I have lived in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, currently in New Hampshire. I've made my full-time career in human resources in a variety of different roles, and at the moment I work for a cancer institute in Boston. I have the good fortune of working mostly remotely, which allows a lot of flexibility, which I've determined is really key at this stage in my life. So I think, like many coming out of the pandemic, and turning 50 at the time of the pandemic, I think those were really key things for me that I knew at that point I needed to start to kind of shake things up for myself. That I knew I wanted to start moving in a different direction professionally. I wanted to do some things that really meant something to me. I wanted to spend my 50s doing things that I loved. And that's certainly with no disrespect to my professional 9 to 5 career, but really wanted to see, what kind of creative outlets were out there for me. So, a conversation with an acquaintance one day in 2022 led me to, what are women in our age group doing? This particular acquaintance was returning to the workforce after it was 15 or more years out of the workforce. And I said to her, so you really need to reinvent yourself. And that really sparked the idea for me to start writing this book to find out, how are women reinventing themselves at a time when women are told they have become less interesting, perhaps less relevant, and that, okay, they've raised their children, so what's next? I wanted to see what some really interesting women, mostly across the US, but a few outside of the US, were doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something we talk about all the time where a lot of women feel stuck, right? They finish maybe a very long career and they're stepping away, but they're not done yet, right? They want to do something else. And everybody says, oh, well, you'll be a grandparent soon. You can just focus on that, which is just, it's one of the things I hear. Um, and, and I think we're looked at, like you said, especially in the workplace. I hear stories all the time of women saying, I just didn't feel like I was being taken as seriously. I felt unseen. We have a very youth centered culture. And so there's a lot of obstacles for women. You started on this journey to interview these women. I mean, first of all, how did you find these 35 women? And what kind of stories were you interested in telling?
So I went about finding women in many different ways. I reached out to everyone I knew across the country. I was looking for demographics, all demographics, so that it wasn't a representation of the people that I am most close with, straight white women in New England. I wanted to tell a variety of stories. So if it wasn't word of mouth, it was on social media, or I actually researched some women. I literally put something in Google that said, reinvention, midlife, women, and I'll admit, that there are a few who said, "You're who and you're doing what? And do I trust you?" And so, there's a little bit of that with it. But the majority that I directly reached out to were very open to it. So that was fun.
What
Um,
was your let's see, most surprising story? Was there one that jumps out at you as being one of the most surprising transformations?
I always think of this particular woman, and I know she will smile when she hears me say this on your podcast. So, she is one I found on social media. She was a well-established neuroscientist in the Providence, Rhode Island area. I believe she worked for Brown, and she had that very successful career for years. She got to the pandemic, and some of her work was drying up because, of course, appointments were in person. So she also knew in the back of her mind, okay, there has to be something else for me. So she had entered I don't know if it was a contest or it was some other competition or group online having to do with fitness. So the women in this group were showing pictures of themselves. She was actually approached to be a model. So she, in her 50s, became a runway model. And, I chuckle when I think, okay, well, that's not a path that every woman takes, as
Sure, sure.
we get older and, we struggle with certain things. She's a beautiful woman in many ways, certainly inside and out. And she said to me, Mary, I am doing this because it gives me a platform. I'm doing this because why aren't there fashion models? Why isn't there more of a focus on women in this age group who have money? So, if you think about fashion, so much of it is designed for women in their 20s.
Sure, who are just building their careers and their finances.
Correct. So this particular woman said, I want there to be beautiful dresses. I want there to be swimsuits and other fashions out there for women in our age group. And so I have been following her since our interview. And so she's been very successful with that.
Can
So
you do
just
you
a very
mind
cool story.
sharing her name so we can follow her as well?
Her name is Melissa Mangili. Excuse me, Mangili.
Okay, I'll have to check her out. One of the things I hear a lot, and I'm sure you did from women I spoke with, was I need purpose. In other words, this chapter, some people call it the third chapter. The first chapter is building, the second chapter is career success, third chapter is what's next. They need purpose. And even if, I mean, I was a journalist, I felt like I had purpose, not every single day, but you look for purpose that almost transcends anything that you've done previously. Is that something that you heard from a lot of your interviews?
Absolutely. That getting to this stage in life, getting to midlife, there is more of a focus on, okay, maybe I've raised children, maybe I've taken care of aging parents, maybe I've had a successful career, but is it really feeding my need for purpose? There is another wonderful woman in the book whom I recently showed on my social media who had a very successful corporate career. I want to say it was just shy of 30 years that she worked for one particular company, and she ended up losing that job. In terms, I believe there were layoffs. She had some time to think about, okay, what do I want my life to look like next? And for years, friends had told her she was a wonderful cook. And so she just sort of experimented. She wrote a cookbook, a couple little, little projects. She came up with the idea to be an executive chef, putting on dinner parties for small groups. So she has some really unique and frankly exquisite meals that she's provided, but part of the fee for that dinner party is built in to go to feed the hungry in the community. So it's purposeful. There is an additional fee on top of the dinner party that automatically is put out into the community for those who need it. And I just love that story. I love her determination to really meet that need.
Yeah, I mean, and this again is something a lot of people on my podcast have talked about, aligning your passion with your purpose. When you can do that, I mean, that's the magic, right? Is figuring out what do I love, and then what feeds my soul, what gives me purpose. And I
Yes.
think that's a great way of looking at it. And women, I really believe women, especially women in midlife, are so talented and are so capable and have so many gifts. And it's really an untapped resource for the corporate world who may not see that.
Right.
Because I've been amazed at some of the transformation that the women that I've talked to have gone through. Any that have piqued your interest where you've said, "Oh, that sounds like kind of fun. Maybe I should try that."
So I was just talking with a friend over the weekend about this, and whether I would ever seriously do something like this, is questionable. But there is another particular woman in North Carolina who she had had careers in being a firefighter and a police officer. She became a general contractor, and uh, she is the director. I don't know if I have the title correct, the director of instruction at a an organization that is training women in the trades. So these women come in, they are trained in carpentry and in some other, plumbing, electrician work,
But areas
other,
that are generally male dominated.
yes. So that, and these women come from backgrounds, whether they are economically disadvantaged, whether they are part of LGBTQ, that community, where they may have more difficulty finding meaningful work.
Um, so one of the things that, I noticed from your bio is you talked about your personal experience, your family experience where your daughter had cancer not once but twice. And I think it's really important to point out that, life doesn't happen in a vacuum. So it's really easy for us to make plans. It's really easy for us to talk about passion and purpose and all of these wonderful things. But at the end of the day, women, our families come first. Men,
Yes.
hopefully, too. And yeah, I don't want to leave them out. And so, talk a little bit about what you're comfortable talking about with your personal experience and how that has impacted your life.
Yeah, that's a good question. So certainly it did sort of push me to where I work now. It did, being a small part. I mean, certainly that my 9 to 5 career does not directly impact patient care or research, but being a small part of cancer care and research is important to me. So it certainly has that impact. I think that you're absolutely right that we make all these plans. We think that our life is going to look a particular way, and you get a phone call and everything's different immediately. I think that I learned so much in the process of supporting her through that. So she was 15 when she was diagnosed first. Um, Obviously, a complete shock, not something that we had any. inkling might happen.
Yeah, what kind of cancer? And if you don't mind me asking, what were the warning signs?
So she had thyroid cancer, which if you talk with anyone, if you do any research on it, there's a tendency to say, oh well, this is one of the good cancers, if there's a good cancer, um, and it is it is highly treatable. It is also tricky for a teenager who's in the middle of adolescence, and the thyroid is such a key part of that. We found very few people providers who were ready and well read enough to really treat her in the way that she needed to be at the ages of 15 and 16. So she had her thyroid removed and has been on, and will be on a thyroid replacement hormone for the rest of her life. I think that um, I learned so much in terms of advocacy, in terms of really needing to take control and not take no for an answer, advocating for. Uh, we live in southern New Hampshire, and much of her treatment was in Boston. Even just advocating for, hey, we can't be there at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning to have lab work done. Can we put all of these appointments together? Simple little things like that, but such a learning curve. Um, I think that at the end of the day, it's sort of a blur, looking back on treatment, surgery, well, two surgeries, but I think that our family certainly looks at things differently, um, in terms of
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
important.
yeah, I was going to say it really puts things in perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, again, you think that, well, my children will go to college, they will do, any number of things, are going to be in corporate jobs, they're going to, I don't even know what, but, I think,
You make plans for them like you make plans for yourself, and
yes.
you just assume that's going to happen. Um,
Right, right.
how old is she now, and how is she doing?
She's 23 and she's doing very well. I think I would refer to her as a free spirit, where she's been through that. She's been through some tough times, in her young life, and she has found a passion in working at a women's shelter, and that fills her up. And I, I love it. I love to see her passion for it, and think back to, did I make decisions based on passions when I was in my 20s, or did I just kind of do what was expected? So
Yeah, and I mean, she's probably an old soul because of what she's
yes,
experienced, and she
she is.
probably has a lot to offer people in need because of
Right,
her, sensitivity, her empathy, and her understanding of what it's like to struggle.
right, exactly, exactly, and that's exactly what I think when I think about her working in that field.
Did you have to take time off of work? I mean, how did that affect your career?
So fortunately, at the time I was working for a university which offered lots of time off, and I had a flexible role. So while I would take time off during her surgeries, I was able to be in and out, and that that's very fortunate. I don't feel like
Yeah,
it
I mean,
had a
I think that's
huge
one of
impact.
I think that's one of the hardest things, especially women, especially if you're not in a secure position or you are in a lower income position. Maybe you may or may not have health insurance. You may or may not be able to take days off. And I think these are the kinds of things that can really derail women professionally.
Definitely, and for better or worse, and I don't think I would have it any other way, in her situation, my daughter's situation, but it is typically the mother or the woman who will take the time off, who will do the caretaking, or the majority of it. And that is no disrespect to the dads or other men involved in situations, but I think that I think
The
many
moms that
women
want to do it. They
is
want to
kind
do
of
it. Yeah.
step up to yes, I wouldn't have it any
Yeah.
other way,
Yeah.
but,
And
yeah,
it's the
the
same thing for
caretaking,
caregiving for older parents, I think,
yes,
is
I would
usually the
agree.
women, with hopefully the support of their partners or spouses. But
Right.
that's definitely the case. You are uniquely in a position to give advice because you've been hearing all these stories, from all of these women that you've interviewed. What would you say to a woman who comes to you and says, "Gosh, I'm just stuck. Like, I have no idea where I should go from here. I feel like I have all these skills, but I don't know what to do with it."
I would say a couple of things. I would say first to, um, take some time to be quiet. And by that, I mean, take a day for yourself, take a weekend. Even I don't know if it's something a lot of women do, but, take a few days or a week and go someplace and get quiet and, you know, allow yourself to sit in the quiet. And it's amazing what comes to you, what ideas come to you when you are you're not running around, taking care of something, taking care of someone. You're not at work, you're not with friends, or dealing with things around the house. I would also say that um, taking a class or having a new experience. I'll say during the pandemic, that was the perfect time to be doing those things. I learned more about arranging flowers during the pandemic. It was just something that seemed like it would be fun, something I enjoy doing to this day. But just, you know, if you're curious about something, then follow up on it. And you don't know where that might take you. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're learning, that's never wasted time, right? Um,
Absolutely.
And I think that just being curious and being open, and maybe somebody at the flower arranging class, if you went to a class, you probably did it online, but let's say you went to a class, maybe that person tells you about something that leads you to something else. And you just never know. And it doesn't have to be a career, it can just be something, a hobby, it can be something that you just really enjoy.
That makes your life interesting and fun. And yes, I would absolutely say that. And the last thing I would say, which I say at the end of the book, is that I found from interviewing these women that it is not necessarily the size of your bank account that matters. It may feel to many of us that, oh, I can't possibly change careers, or I can't possibly do a 6-month trip abroad. It's something I've always wanted to do because of the financial piece. I think it's not the size of the bank account, it's how flexible.
Reallocating or rethinking about money.
Correct, correct. Are there different things that you could do that will not significantly alter your life, but that would open opportunities for you? And I bet if going back to being quiet for a while, I bet we would all be surprised if we really think about it, the types of things we might be able to make happen.
Right. And I think also just what are you looking for? Are you looking for experience or are you looking for things? If you're not looking for things, that really frees you up to spend your money in a way that, could really open up doors for you and open up your life. Um, what's on your bucket list? I mean, is there anything, are there maybe more than one thing that you're looking at?
What immediately comes to mind is I would like to take a trip to Ireland and Scotland. So I've spent a few days in each country. I'd like to spend an extended period of time there. The second thing that has come up in the course of writing this book is that I am interested in potentially writing another book, a, a similar approach, but it would be about women in predominantly male occupations
Mm.
and their experiences and their surprises and the pros and cons and all of that. I'm just so interested in people's individual stories and what they learned. So that may
Yeah,
be my next project.
and I'm sure you have learned a lot, as I have, from the people that I interview. And I keep
Yes,
thinking I'm not going to learn anything new. And literally every time I interview someone, I go, aha, that's a great way of looking at it. And so I
right.
think, I get it. I feel like I get as much, if not more, from my interviews as my audience. And so that's a
Oh,
really,
that's wonderful. And
yeah.
that makes your job interesting and fulfilling.
Oh, absolutely. Well, how can people follow what you're doing, Mary?
So I have a website, maryeisenhower.com, and I am on Facebook as Mary Eisenhower author.
And then you're also on LinkedIn. And I'll put
I am
all
also on
those,
LinkedIn.
I will put all those notes in the show notes so that people can follow you. And best of luck. It sounds like you're really doing something really interesting, something I'm fascinated by, because again, it completely aligns with what I'm doing. So thank you so much for spending this time with us today. And keep
It
me
was great to
posted
be
on.
here. Yeah, I just love talking about the book, and I'm so thankful and so happy that we were able to connect for this.
Absolutely. Ta da!